It's Sunday, July 28th, day 296 of the October 7th War. In this international edition, we'll head to New York to get the latest from Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, to London to dissect the International Court of Justice with expert Natasha Hausdorff, and then to Paris, where Israeli Olympic flag bearer Peter Palchik is waiting to talk to us from the site of the 2024 Summer Olympic Games. I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Stand With Us TV Live. Shalom from Israel. We have a packed show for you today, from the military frontline to the frontline of international law, and then the athletes representing the Jewish state at the Olympics. Stay with us for all of it. Now, these are, of course, turbulent times with tensions on every border of Israel. In a moment, we'll get the latest security briefing. But first, the news headlines from the last week at war. Funerals have taken place after a Hezbollah rocket attack on a soccer field in the northern Druze Israeli town of Majd al-Shams killed 12 children. This is the most severe incident in the north since October the 8th, when regular Hezbollah attacks began. The Majd al-Shams massacre has provoked outrage among the Israeli public and in Druze communities in Israel, but also in Druze communities in Syria and Lebanon. May the memories of the murdered children be a blessing. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has spoken out on preparedness for a wider conflict with Hezbollah. He stated that while Israel does not seek war with Hezbollah, it is ready for one with military strategies planned. The Stand With Us Center for Legal Justice has filed a federal lawsuit following the violent riot that took place in Los Angeles last month. The lawsuit is against the organizers Code Pink, Palestinian Youth Movement, and the Westpac Foundation, alleging that they blocked access to the Adas Torah synagogue, violating worshippers' rights. Israel proposed a new hostage release deal with Hamas to the White House, including an inspection mechanism to prevent combatants from moving to northern Gaza, maintaining Israeli presence on the Gaza-Egypt border during the initial phase, and requiring a list of all living hostages that Hamas will release as part of the agreement. Well, joining us now is our friend and military expert. He's the former international spokesperson of the IDF and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Good to have you with us once again. Thank you for being on Stand With Us TV. Deadly attacks on Israel's north, leaving kids and teens murdered. So what does Israel need to effectively do to stave off these Iranian-backed Hezbollah attacks?
Yeah, it's a sad day, another sad day in Israel. And really, if you want my honest answer, the big answer to your question, it isn't local. It's not about what the IDF will now retaliate or has already retaliated against Hezbollah for killing more than 10 Israeli civilians, or 10 civilians in Israel. I think that if we want to really answer that question, then the answer is about 1,200 miles away from Israel. That's Iran. And we can continue to stay in this, what seems to be perpetual cycle of terror and attacks and violence against Israelis, whether it is from the south, Gaza, or from the north, Hezbollah, or from the far southeast, from the Houthis, doesn't matter. The common denominator here and the address of the sender is one and the same, and that is Tehran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And as long as we don't deal with them and change the equation and force the Iranians to change their strategy, their murderous, belligerent strategy against Israel, then I don't think that we will see substantial change when it comes to either of Iran's proxies, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Houthis, or the others. On the tactical level, I think that the IDF now must retaliate strongly against Hezbollah, and we'll see the scope and severity, the distance from Israel, and how hurtful these attacks now, this retaliation will be against Hezbollah. But bottom line, We're in a cycle of violence that serves Iranian purposes, doesn't serve Israeli purposes, and unfortunately, Israeli civilians are paying a price for it.
And it also bolsters Hamas, doesn't it? You can imagine that the Hamas leader is very pleased with these recent Hezbollah attacks. Take us through what a potential all-out war with Hezbollah would look like, because there are some very worrying estimates, and clearly Israel has to some extent been trying to avoid that until now. Could Israel deal with a real all-out multi-front war?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, Israel could deal. The longer answer is that Israel would rather not. And you are very correct in speaking about horrible consequences. And I think that most people, even those living in Israel, who have endured almost 10 months of war now in the south and in the north, even they cannot really imagine the scope of an all-out war with Hezbollah, especially not the first week or so, when Hezbollah would be at peak fighting power and firing about 4,500 rockets and missiles all over Israel, and where there would be hundreds of Israeli casualties every day. It's important that people understand that when we speak about a war with Iran's biggest and most powerful proxy, we're talking about stakes that are much higher and a potential threat to the very core of the state of Israel, and where the collateral damage, where the amount of Israelis killed will be unlike anything that we've seen before, and where the amount of damage and catastrophe in Lebanon will be something that will make Gaza look like just a warm-up for the real event. And that is, without being jokeful about it, it is a catastrophe or a war of orders of magnitude much larger. That is the reason why the IDF so far has not decided to go beyond and escalate the situation, despite the fact that Israel has been under attack from Hezbollah basically since the 8th of October.
And so we saw Prime Minister Netanyahu telling Congress this week, give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster. He also made the case that our fight is your fight. You're in the US right now. Do you think that message was taken on board?
You know, it was an impressive oratory performance, but I think that it would have been in Israeli interest to go faster ourselves without talking about American support and bombs. And I think that what we have been doing in Gaza for the last almost 10 months is unfortunately giving Hamas too many breathers and too many options to stay alive. And with our 115 remaining hostages in mind, I think that the pressure should be far heavier and brutal on Hamas, on their operatives, on their leadership, on their infrastructure, and to force them into submission and to agree with our terms, to defeat Hamas. And sadly, I don't think that we have applied enough continuous pressure on Hamas, and I hope that will change. Currently now there are additional IDF divisions moving into Gaza, Khan Yunis, and another one in the central part of the Gaza Strip, and additional troops along the Rafah corridor. So there's more troops now. But at the end of the day, the war goes on. It is protracted. And it's a nice talking point to speak about others. But I think that first and foremost, Israel should be applying pressure on our enemies to make the optimal conditions to get our people back, and of course to obtain security and freedom for Israelis by defeating Hamas.
Meanwhile, of course, disgusting scenes outside of Congress with the Freedom Bell defaced, pro-Hamas graffiti over the Capitol, American flags burnt. What are we to make of this?
Well, I think Americans, what Israelis and Jews make of it, it's nothing new. These are thugs, these are terror supporters, genocide supporters, Israel haters and American haters, and it's unfortunately, sadly, nothing new. But from Israeli and Jewish perspectives, and I've been speaking with Jewish communities all over North America and in Europe, and they've seen this level of violence, they've seen the hatred, and they've seen the support and the genocidal calls, and now it was just on live US TV for everybody to see. It was out in the open, but I think, sadly, nothing new. What I think Americans, non-Jewish Americans, should make of this is please understand what it is that the Jews are facing, and please understand that this isn't only about the Jews. This isn't about Israel. This is about hating and despising the very underlying values of Western society, of law and order, of democracy, of civil rights, of liberties, of freedom, freedom of religion and expression. These people who espouse terrorist ideologies, who chant genocidal slogans, who are on the side of Hamas and Iran, are people who, as they clearly demonstrated and showed, have nothing but contempt for America, for its values, and for democracy and for freedom. When you burn an American flag in the American Capitol, it is perhaps the ultimate thing to do when you want to show that you hate America, the very same country that they live in. And what I was amazed by was, yes, I was happy to see that there were strong words by American politicians against this display of vile anti-American hatred. But what I found strikingly missing from these statements, including by senior elected and appointed officials, was we are going to hold these people accountable. Not only is it not okay to burn an American flag and to deface an American monument in the American Capitol, but these people will be held to justice, whether they are wearing masks or not wearing masks. And I think that's a sign of weakness. That is not what America needs. That is definitely not what American Jews need in order to be defended and safe in their home country, where they are loyal, law-abiding citizens, proud Americans, serving their country, paying their taxes, and respecting their institutions. And sadly, they are not getting the kind of defense and protection that they are entitled to.
Very well said. Let's talk about the IDF raids that were carried out, the strikes in Yemen. After the explosive UAV drone that was sent by the Houthis, hitting Tel Aviv, killing a 50-year-old man, Yevgeny Ferda, injuring several other people. Tell us your analysis of the attack, the Israeli response, and the message that it was sending.
Yeah, it's been quite a week. There's been so many things happening, and it seems almost distant history, this brazen Houthi attack. It was an attack that not the first, of course. They've fired more than 220 rockets and missiles towards Israel. This one unfortunately hit and caused a casualty, and therefore, perversely, only this one got a response from Israel. I was happy to see the Israeli response because it was a professional, targeted, and effective strike on a dual-purpose facility. The port of Hodeidah is where the Iranian Revolutionary Guard offloads their weapons that they deliver to the Houthi-aligned terrorist organization, the Iranian-aligned terrorist organization, the Houthis. That is where they deliver their shore-to-coast, shore-to-sea missiles. That is where they deliver their drones. That is how they provide weapons to the Houthis. So it's very much infrastructure that supports the Houthis' military illicit activity, including when they're firing missiles at international shipping lanes and when they're abducting international vessels out in international waters. So I think it was a good strike. It was well executed by the IDF. I am puzzled at why so far the US and the UK, who are leading the task force, allegedly leading the task force against the Houthis, haven't found it within their abilities or capacity to do a similar thing, even though it's been 9 months. I commend the defensive efforts that the US has been doing, and they are tremendously important to keep Israel safe and to prevent a general escalation here, and as such, very commendable. But bottom line, I think that we should draw a straight line across the Arabian Peninsula between Hodeidah in Yemen and the area of Bandar Abbas in the Persian or Arabian Gulf on the other side of Saudi Arabia. Bandar Abbas is an important Iranian port. That is where they offload oil and petrochemical products to China and to Russia and to other countries that are collaborating in the sanctions evasion scheme that the Iranians have been doing successfully for years. And I think that there are many similarities between these two different locations. I hope that Israel will formulate a well-thought, well-rounded strategy that includes economic, political, diplomatic, and military steps, and that this too will be part of the tools that Israel will bring to the table in order to, again, and I go back to the beginning of our conversation, if Israel wants peace and quiet and to continue to be the miracle of the Middle East that Israel is, to nurture our little oasis in the desert, then Israel needs safety. And the thing standing between Israel and safety is Iran. And if we want Iran to be different, then I think we should make them feel the results of attacking Israel. And there's many ways to do that, including, but not directly and first thing to do, but including strikes similar to what Israel did in Hudaydah against one Iranian proxy.
Finally, obviously, the hostages at the top of our minds, as always. We saw this week the IDF recover the bodies of 5 hostages in a mission in Khan Yunis, Maya Golan, Oren Golden, Ravid Katz, Sergeant Brodsky, and Staff Sergeant Tomer Yaakov Achimas. What can you share with us about that mission?
I just saw a quick video of the IDF division commander, Brigadier General Dan Goldfuss, inside the same tunnel where he and his troops uncovered the bodies of those murdered Israelis from. I think it sent a very good message that a senior Israeli commander was there, showing it to the world, and I hope that people will see it and pay attention to it, and I commend the troops for doing it. I think it was a very brave and successful action. Sadly, it brought home only dead Israelis, and it provides a certain amount of solace to the families that can now finally bury their loved ones and close the circle, the initial circle of grief. But of course, for 115 other families, that is not the situation. And I'm amazed by the amount of pressure that is applied on Israel, on the Israeli leadership, and the amount of infighting in Israel over the reported terms of an agreement and the daylight that exists between Israel and the US when it comes to negotiations. And I'm appalled by the fact that very little pressure is applied on Hamas, on their main supporters, Qatar, and on Iran, which enables all this. And it all seems as if the easiest and softest thing to strike and apply pressure on is the Israeli government, which finds itself in a very, very challenging situation. I think that at the end of the day, I hope that we will have positive news coming out of Rome, where there's supposed to be a summit attended by the head of the Mossad, CIA, Shabak, and US officials and Qatari officials. I hope that for once we will have positive news from there for the sake of the families and the entire Jewish people. I remain pessimistic because we've been in similar situations long before, and I can just reiterate that I believe that we have to continue to apply strong, relentless pressure on Hamas, much more than what we are doing now and have been doing in the last months, in order to force them into recognizing that there is no other way out, no other way to stop the fighting and pressure than to hand over the hostages and to surrender.
Well, let's leave it there, and let's hope that next time we speak, we'll have more positive news to discuss. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, safe travels, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, next up, with Israel being castigated multiple times at the International Court of Justice, we're joined by a leading voice in international law. She qualified from Oxford University, clerked for the President of the Supreme Court of Israel in Jerusalem, and she's a sought-after speaker who frequently appears on the BBC, CNN, Fox News, and many other networks. She's also part of UK Lawyers for Israel, a key ally of Stand With Us UK. Joining us from London, Natasha Hausdorff. Thank you for joining us from London. Such a sad day here in Israel. Let's talk about the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. I doubt we would see Lebanon hauled before either court following the Hezbollah massacre against innocent Israeli Jewish kids playing football, playing soccer, and yet we see them coming after Israel so frequently. So can Israel get a fair hearing at the ICJ and at the ICC?
Well, Michael, it's my pleasure to be with you. In the context of which you framed this question, it's impossible to ignore the fact that the ICC is currently presided over by the president of the court, Judge Salam, from Lebanon. He had previously run twice for prime minister of that country, which necessarily involves a connection with Hezbollah in one way or another. And he has himself a vicious anti-Israel track record, not least in the context of his previous position as ambassador to the United Nations, where he voted against Israel over 200 times and accused the Jewish state of being a terrorist, apartheid, engaging in war crimes. So clearly not impartial, the International Court of Justice, that is. The approach that has been taken thus far, and there are two parallel cases proceeding with respect to Israel. One is in the context of South Africa's application, its allegation of genocide against Israel. We have seen a succession of provisional measures orders with respect to Israel, which have been universally misrepresented, in many respects also misunderstood, but have clearly been less clear than some of the orders that the court has put out in other cases, notably in the context of similar allegations that were made with respect to Russia and its war against Ukraine. So when we consider the track record that the court already has, the International Court of Justice, in the context of South Africa's case against Israel, and we also consider the most recent development, its International Court of Justice advisory opinion, a non-legally binding opinion which was delivered Friday a week ago, which rewrote history, purported, it seemed, to wipe Israel off of the map by seeking to recognize what it called Palestinian territory that was contiguous and needed to be respected and preserved as one unit, failing, of course, to recognize the existence of Israel between the West Bank, the Palestinian-controlled territory in areas A and B, and the Gaza Strip controlled by Hamas. When we consider those aspects, then I'm afraid the resounding answer to your question is no, there cannot be any fair trial for Israel in either context in the International Court of Justice. And so far as the International Criminal Court is concerned, well, so far we have seen a decision by the pre-trial chamber already a number of years ago when this investigation supposedly against Israel or Israelis was opened that rode roughshod over the court's jurisdictional requirements. And most recently, we have seen an application by the current prosecutor, Karim Khan. We have seen the public summary that he has put out of that application, in which every single statement that was advanced was false. And this was the subject of a submission or an application by UK Lawyers for Israel and some other NGOs that dealt with the inaccuracies of what the prosecutor, Karim Khan, had publicized about his application for arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. These are just some of the issues, unfortunately, that stand very firmly against either Israel having any sense of a fair trial in the context of the ICJ or any Israelis having a fair trial in the context of the International Criminal Court.
And talking about the ICC, what are the chances that Israel's prime minister or other senior Israeli leaders could find themselves with the threat of arrest?
Well, that depends, of course, on whether pre-trial chamber 1 will issue the arrest warrants that the prosecutor has applied for. Since the UK made an application to submit its observations on jurisdiction, those were expected to include observations relating to the Oslo Accords. These Oslo Accords were thrown out of the window by the International Court of Justice most recently, but it's fair to say that any issuing of arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court would also be failing to acknowledge at a very basic level the fact that no Palestinian entity has any criminal jurisdiction over any Israelis, so much so that they could delegate that jurisdiction to the International Criminal Court. So the jurisdictional issues that the UK raised in the first instance and have been picked up upon now by many other states, including Germany, the Czech Republic, Hungary, the United States, and NGOs such as UK Lawyers for Israel, that has clearly delayed the process. The hope and expectation would be that that Pre-Trial Chamber 1 would properly apply the law and the facts and decline to issue these warrants, not least because there's another important aspect of this that the court has to consider, and that is what's called the principle of complementarity. Now, complementarity is a key aspect of how the International Criminal Court operates, and it requires that where a state that has jurisdiction, as Israel in this case, of any alleged crimes that have been committed in the context of Israeli territory, where a state that is willing and able to investigate any real substantiated allegations of criminal activity exists, then that state should be left to investigate and potentially prosecute any relevant crimes. Here, we haven't even had the end of the war. It is still ongoing. So it's plain that the prosecutor has not given this principle of complementarity any regard whatsoever. It's another reason that these arrest warrants should be going nowhere. I would just add that while we know about the arrest warrant application against the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister of the State of Israel, it is not always the case that applications for warrants are public. Many may very well be made in secret, and we simply won't know about those, or indeed be able to input helpfully to the court to counter the misinformation and the very problematic legal analysis that has underpinned this application, which has been made public.
Very important that countries who value freedom stand against this course of action by the ICC. When you hear journalists in media interviews with you talk about proportionality and stress that Israel is being disproportionate in its response in its fight back against Hamas, how do you answer?
That it is a complete misrepresentation of what the principle of proportionality requires in international law. It's often presented in the context of comparing casualty counts. Now, not only is that desperately macabre, but it's an incentivization, certainly, to Hamas to increase its casualty count. It's also simply not how international law works. It is illogical. It is abhorrent to suggest that Israel may have been permitted in some way to kill an equal number of Palestinians as those Israelis that were slaughtered on the 7th of October, and that subsequently have been the victim of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad rockets. No, the principle of proportionality is widely recognized. It is codified in the law of armed conflict, and it requires the reasonable military commander to conduct a balancing exercise to weigh up the direct, concrete military advantage sought by any military action, by any strike on a target or military maneuver, to weigh up the direct military advantage against the anticipated civilian or collateral damage. Now, there's no straightforward formula for that. Ultimately, it's a decision on a case-by-case basis. But the idea that anybody, any media organization or any individual can conduct a proportionality analysis of Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip without knowledge of the military advantage sought by each and every individual strike is laughable. Well, it would be if it wasn't so desperately serious and tragic. It is legally illiterate, and it is part and parcel of a campaign of misinformation about international law, in particular against Israel, this agenda of lawfare, which is an abuse of legal processes and established international law in order to advance essentially the agenda of Hamas here. And it is having a direct impact on Israel's ability to defend itself and its citizens. We have seen the way that the legal allegations, faux allegations, the inversion of international law has impacted the discourse over these issues, has impacted the rhetoric that we have heard coming from close allies like the United States, like the United Kingdom, and inevitably this has directly impacted Israel's ability to conduct its war against Hamas in Gaza in the way that it might otherwise have done.
Now, you've defended Israel passionately, whether it's the Monk debates recently with our good friend Douglas Murray, or on the BBC and many other platforms besides. What's the most egregious slur that you've faced about Israel, and how do you answer it?
Firstly, Michael, I would say that primarily I see myself as defending the rule of law and the truth and the proper upholding of international law, which is critical not just for Israel, but for any law-abiding states, any individuals that prize the rule of law, especially in the international system. But in terms of the allegations that we've been hearing against Israel, I mean, they are essentially all reflective, unfortunately, of modern blood libels. In that respect, the allegations that we hear of occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, apartheid, genocide, they're all baseless in fact and law, but they also have a particular purpose here. And so in answer to your question, I'd try and sort of lump them together because they, unchallenged, are certainly gaining currency. And the egregious use of these canards, these blood libels, is part and parcel of the lawfare agenda that I was setting out. The latter, the most recent introduction perhaps of this allegation of genocide, the reason that's particularly egregious is because here we are looking at the victims of acts of genocide on the 7th of October that are being accused of the very crimes that were committed against them. And this is a term that was coined by Raphael Lemkin in the aftermath of the Holocaust to provide legal terminology for the genocide that was committed against Jews. It's important that everyone watching understands that the crime of genocide is somewhat unique in that it relies entirely on there being an intention to eradicate a group in whole or in part, an ethnic, religious, racial, or national group. And that is what we saw with respect to Jews being targeted because they are Jews. The abhorrence of this allegation being deployed against Israel when it has gone above and beyond the requirements of international law to prevent civilian casualties in Gaza, when it has done more than any other army in the history of warfare to provide warnings to civilians, to avoid civilian casualties, and to provide humanitarian assistance and facilitate international aid, despite Hamas seeking to divert it and withhold it from civilians in need. In that context, the abhorrence of this false allegation is perhaps the worst that we have seen, but it has been deployed for good reason. People are now saying that they can use Israel and genocide in the same sentence and not be challenged in the way that they might have been before South Africa's application invoking this canard at the International Court of Justice. And that is a perfect example of how they are seeking to shift the Overton window, the parameters of the debate, acceptable debate about this, and the proffering of these false allegations is at the very center of that.
Finally, let's talk about campus. UK Lawyers for Israel works closely with Stand With Us UK with campus students. So for these students, whether they're in the UK, the US, or elsewhere, how important is it to know your rights?
Vitally important, and I'm very proud that UK Lawyers for Israel Charitable Trust has cooperated and coordinated with Stand With Us to produce the Know Your Rights booklet, which is available on the UK LFI website, and highlights to students in the UK, and there are equivalents, of course, for students around the world, the legal frameworks that exist in their respective countries to ensure their rights at university, on university campuses, if they are inviting outside speakers, and to ensure that they know the case that they need to make to the university authorities if they are finding themselves targeted, victimized, or discriminated against in terms of their ability to bring speakers onto campuses to challenge the very important issues that we've been discussing so far, and the developing situation as it pertains to Israel. So arm yourselves with the knowledge, I always say, and the support network is there, both through UK Lawyers for Israel and through Stand With Us. And long may that continue, Michael. Thank you for your friendship and your important support and efforts to ensure that all students on campus know that they are not alone in these extremely troubling times.
So important, and students can go to standwithus.com, look up Know Your Rights, and get that booklet. It's a thrill to hear from you. We appreciate it very much, and thank you for your partnership as always. Natasha Hausdorff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A fascinating conversation. Now we head over to France, the site, of course, of the 2024 Olympic Summer Games. Israel is sending 88 athletes to Paris to compete in 15 sports, with Israeli Olympic officials expressing hope of returning with 4 or 5 medals. And jointly holding the Israeli flag at the opening ceremony is our next guest. Waiting for us at the Olympic Village, former European champion judoka Peter Palchik. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here.
And as you can see on the screen, we're surrounded by flags. We're supporting you. But how's the energy and the vibe with the Israeli team?
The energy is amazing. Everybody thrilled to come and compete already. And the atmosphere is very good. We have a lot of Israeli flags inside our rooms, in the building. So we have that support of the nationality all around us, and it's quite amazing. I was waiting for this, for this event so much, so long, and I'm very happy and very proud to be here.
And not only are you there, not only are you competing, but you were Team Israel's flag bearer. How does it feel to have that status representing the country?
It was quite amazing. It was the best honor I could get, as a young athlete, as a young kid, I should say. I always, my eyes was always heading to the flag bearer through all the years, through all the Olympic Games. And I was thinking to myself, maybe one day it could be me. And today it is me. So
Incredible.
I'm just thrilled, I'm just thrilled.
And of course, you'll have a huge number of people watching who'll be cheering on the Israeli athletes, but they may not know all of them. So I know there are many, but give us some of the names of the ones to watch.
Okay, so you have, let's start from sailing. You have Sharon Canto, and world champion. And you have in Balanier in the judo team, the women judo team, in Balanier world champion as well. You have Razershko. Actually, all the women's team is quite amazing. In the boys, you have me, you have Sagimuki, Toar Budbul, Baruch Shmailov, Jan Volchak, the young one from our team, 20 years old.
Wow.
He is amazing, and we're expecting a lot from him. There is really a good, very, very good swimmers, women swimmers, and really all the team, the football team. First time in the Olympic Games, we're all excited from that team as well. I think any one of our team is very special, is very unique, and we're gonna support and cheer each and every one of our team.
Absolutely. And let's talk about you for a minute. You're someone who's overcome adversity since birth. Tell us a bit about that.
When people ask me, who are you? I always thinking about my answer. So during the years, I completed the answer completely. And I say today, my answer is I'm a warrior. I'm a fighter. Since day one, as you said, my life taught me that nothing comes in an easy way. I had a tough birth. I born 5.1 kilograms. Very, very tough birth. When they
That's
pulled
11
me out,
pounds. That's a lot.
11,
That's
almost 12 pounds. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. I have a joke on myself. It's a baby that ate a baby.
Your poor mom.
Yeah, I have twins, Mike. You know that,
Yeah.
and they're both weight. It was my weight.
Wow.
So yeah, you can imagine. And when they pulled me, they broke me totally. I had almost 20 broken bones and fractures. So yeah, it was a fight since day one, since my first breath.
Absolutely. And I always talk about Israeli resilience. You're a symbol of that. And of course, this is no ordinary Olympics. We're a different nation since October the 7th, and everyone feels it, including, of course, the judo team. Your team is coached by Oren Smadja, and whose son Omer fell in battle so recently.
Yeah.
I was at the funeral, as were all of you, all of the team, and the pain is so fresh. So my question is, what does it mean to the athletes to be competing for Israel at this time?
I think it's also quite unique on that aspect as well, because it's not an ordinary Olympics. We all felt it during these 9 months. The nationality, the symbols, it's all much more powerful right now for me. And we had that tragedy very close to us. Son of our head coach Oren killed in the battle, and it was very hard to accept it. In the first days, I was shocked, and I was with Oren when I had that phone call. It was really, really hard for me, because the first week for when it's happened, I couldn't even train and focus. And then after a couple of days, I had a talk with my psychologist, and he said, like, with all the tragedy, with all the pain, first it's Oren's story, and with all the hard emotions, you need to focus on your journey, focus on your goals, focus on your targets, and take that pain, and it should give you motivation. If it's holding you down and not letting you get on the targets, get on the when you should have your mind. So let it go. So I think I'm in the place right now that it gives me a lot of power, a lot of motivation. Not only Omer, not only Oren. I think all the IDF soldiers that proudly and bravely doing their best to protect our country. They give me so much support, so much inspiration, I should say, to my journey. And I think I just need to bow and to raise my hand and to do what I'm doing in honor for them as well. So I think this is the story for my journey right now.
And I know how much you do to support the soldiers and to represent Israel on the world stage. You've been such a friend and a partner with Stand With Us in getting Israel's message to the world. And I know how important that is to you. Let's talk about your sporting chances for a moment. You won that gold medal, the European champion in 2020. You won the bronze in the mixed team judo at the last Olympics. So how do you see your chances in Paris?
Wow. And I know for sure that I'm a better athlete than I was in the last Olympics in Tokyo 2021. I'm much more mature. I have much more experience, and also a new records in my career. So I know I can do better. I will focus first of all on the journey. I always tell people that comes in the street to me, like, bring us a gold medal. Like, what's your expectations? And I always tell them, each fight I prepare as it was my first or last fight. So I don't have nothing else in my mind, and that's the way my preparation for any competition, and it's not it shouldn't be any difference right now. So every fight, if it was the first or the last.
Well, Peter, when you walk out to the mat, like with every single member of Team Israel, we'll be standing with you now more than ever. Do you have a final message to the Stand With Us audience supporting you and Israel from all over the world?
Wow, I have the goosebumps, you know, when I think of it, because we're most of the time, most of our lives, like the live river taking us from one point to another, and sometimes we have things like we take things for granted. So first of all, we should not take things for granted. We should thank for every day we're living, for every experience we're having. So I'm in a big thankful mindfulness right now for the experience I have right now, and I want to enjoy it and to feel it in the maximum power, and for you guys to support us fully with full power in every like in social media or in the TV, whatever you watched the event. Make it loud.
We will.
And I'm sure that every athlete, no matter what kind of sports you support, every athlete will make you guys proud. So we will make our best to lift our flags high, and with God bless also to hear our beautiful and the most beautiful song ever, our Atikva anthem.
We can't wait. We'll be cheering you on all along the way. B'atzlacha, and we have such pride in you and all of Team Israel. Peter Palchik from the Olympic Village, thank you so very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Am Yisrael Chai.
Amen. And in addition to cheering on the blue and white team, as with every Olympics, we bow our heads and remember the 11 Israeli athletes murdered by members of a Palestinian terrorist organization at the 1972 Olympics in Munich. May their memories be an eternal blessing. Don't forget, if you enjoy our live shows and you want to be kept up to speed with all that's happening in Israel, be sure to click on the subscribe button on YouTube. And before we go, if you'd like to join our efforts, you can do something great today. Go to standwithus.com/donate to support our work. Thank you. We're sending love to the Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters worldwide and all of our allies, and our prayers for every hostage to be back home with their family soon. Together, we will prevail. Thanks for watching, and go Team Israel. Am Yisrael Chai.